these vaccines are still under emergency use authorization. Let's not forget that. And I don't think there's very many among us who think there's still an emergency here. So I read some reports over the last, couple of days since the vote on why this is not a bad thing, why this is a good thing. And I want to go at some of those arguments one by one. So first, people say, well, we have lots of other vaccines that kids are required to take to go to school. Number one, most of these vaccines have been around for decades and decades, since the 50s and 60s for some of them.
Right.
They protect from diseases like polio and hepatitis that have real health consequences for children, like liver damage or paralysis. Not a disease that causes, a mild flu-like symptom, at worst, a drippy nose for a few days.
Right.
I've heard people say, well, kids have died from this. And unfortunately, some have. But we're talking about, in the hundreds, maybe 1,000 since the beginning of COVID. Studies have shown that, north of 90% of children have some degree of immunity. Either they've had asymptomatic cases or they've had COVID once or twice and have recovered from it. So no, your children should not have to get this. No children should have to get this. It should be a decision between parents and their pediatricians. There is no such thing as a consensus in science. And when you have 15 people and not one person decided to ask just a couple of questions, and what's wrong with asking questions? Nothing has been decided here. And we're starting this mass vaccination campaign for children, and there is no long-term safety data on this. And then you keep hearing safe and effective, safe and effective.
Right.
Well, how do you know? This thing's only a few years old. And listen, if we were dealing with a disease that in a high percentage of cases caused severe illness and death in children, I'd say, you know what, maybe it's worth the risk that we protect kids from this awful disease.
Yeah.
Right.
For children,
Yep.
COVID is not an awful disease. Why are we doing this? Our children are not lab rats.